And we are live. Welcome, everyone, to iCritic Live. This is the podcast where we talk about movies, pop culture, and life in between. I am your host, Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and it is an honor and pleasure to have you here today. Now, we do these as many times as we can, usually on a Sunday afternoon, and this is going to be a very bit of a different one. Now, funny enough, I recorded a video that you will probably see on Monday or Tuesday where I am talking about Bob Iger's comments on the writer's strike and how tone deaf they are, and how he may, in fact, have had his Save Disney moment. That will go up on Monday or Tuesday. Wednesday, maybe, if things don't work out. But in the video, I mentioned that there was a specific YouTube creator that had some takes on Bob Iger's comments that were so off and wrong that I was actually quite flabbergasted that these comments were said in the first place. Now, I did say in that video that maybe I will do another video responding to them, and I guess in a way I am. We are going to be doing this live stream where I respond to a couple of their videos about the writer strike, the SAG strike, SAG-AFTRA, I should say. And it's for a content creator that I honestly do like. I do want to make it clear. We're not doing this live stream to, did I freeze up a little bit there? Oh, I think I did. Okay, well, anyway, I'll start that part over just in case. But the content creator in question is Clownfish TV. Now, I know a lot of people, particularly my lefty friends, who do not like Clownfish TV. They consider them fear baiting. They consider them to be clickbaity. They believe that they do not understand the industry. And I disagree to a certain extent. I don't agree with everything Clownfish TV says. Like I go there to get an opinion, and an opinion is what I will get. It's not always the correct opinion. It's not always the opinion that I think is, right. But I do like hearing opinions. And I have to admit, as far as websites that lean right, for the most part, although they also have left-leaning views as well, I think they're pretty sensible. I think they do understand things about the business that other YouTubers don't understand because they have actually worked in the business. So I do want to state up front that I personally like Clownfish TV, even if I don't completely agree with them all the time. It does not mean we don't disagree. And in this case, when it comes to the strike, they are so wildly off on what the strike is about and what's the outcome is and why it's being done that I almost felt like, I think I need to kind of respond to this. I need to respond to this. I think they're just completely off. I know Queen Danny's surprised. Yeah, not everyone gets it right. And so we are going to go through the Bob Iger video pretty much in full because it's not terribly long. Don't worry if those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, which is really the best way to do this podcast, you don't really need to see what I am seeing because it is all there. So the video in question is called Disney CEO Bob Iger Slams Striking WGA Writers as Unrealistic. Now, again, I am going to have my opinions of this. Well, let's do here. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to have my opinions on Bob Iger's words on Monday or Tuesday. Subscribe to this channel if you want to be notified. Ring the bell, of course. If you want to know what I think of his comments. Right now, I'm talking about Neon's comments because Geeky Sparkles is not here. One thing you will notice before we start the video, I am subscribed. So Geeky, despite the fact that I am disagreeing with your video, hopefully I can get a woohoo. And I did give it a thumbs down because why not, right? So let us do this video. We're gonna more or less watch, and then I'm gonna break it down, and I'm gonna explain why this is just so off.
Bob Iger coming out against the strike, the writers and the actors in Hollywood who are so oppressed, who are so underpaid. Bob Iger says their demands are not realistic, and he just signed a contract through the end of 2026. He's going to be the Disney CEO for the next couple of years, and he's telling them, well, basically what we've been telling them and what we've been telling you, that a lot of the demands are not realistic in this current economic climate. So we're going to talk.
So first of all, it is very interesting that Neon takes the approach like what the writers are asking for are not realistic in this economic climate, that their demands. He's basically siding with Bob Iger in this video that the demands are unrealistic. Now, interesting that he didn't mention with the contract negotiation that, well, Bob Iger is extending his contract in these unrealistic economic times, but he's going to be paid somewhere between $22 to $45 million a year, depending on how the stock does. And here's the thing. If he can afford to pay himself that much, he can afford to take a pay cut and pay his writers and actors a little bit more. He also did not, I forget, because I only watched this video once, so, you know, it's not like I remember this beat for beat. That's why we're watching it again. But he also, you notice, did not mention that Bob Iger was giving this video on a ranch that was basically a billionaire's summer camp that he flew a private jet to. Like, if the economic times are really that bad, maybe some of these things should be cut back because they're not necessary expenses. But, you know, let's continue.
Talk about this. This is going to be a gut punch to a lot of Hollywood types because Disney is one of the biggest players out there, right? And they're like, yeah, you're asking for the moon. It's not going to happen.
They're not asking for the moon. They're actually asking for some pretty reasonable demands, in my opinion.
It's disturbing. It's disturbing. He calls it disturbing.
I find Bob Iger's paycheck to be a little disturbing, if you will, but whatever.
So before you get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, view. And again, remember, just yesterday it was announced that Bob Iger signed through the end of 2026 to be the Disney CEO. Mm-hmm. And if this is the tone he's setting, I think a lot of actors and writers are in for a very rude awakening at the House of Mouse.
Now, here's something that's already being lost in translation. Yes, Bob Iger is taking this stance. Yes, Disney is one of the biggest players in Hollywood. I mean, heck, they bought Fox. There were 5 major studio conglomerates. Now there's 4 because Disney bought Fox. So Disney is definitely one of the bigger ones. But one of the things that's not being mentioned here is, like, it's really not up to Disney individually on what happens with this strike or what happens with these writers. That is the guild and union that is negotiating for all the studios to make a deal. It's not like Disney themselves can say, well, we're not going to follow that deal. If SAG and WGA negotiate a contract where they're going to get pay raises and things like that, then Disney has to follow suit on the bare minimum. That's the whole point of these contract negotiations. That's why Disney is part of the union, as well as all the actors and writers. Now, there is one thing I will say. What he might be hinting at here, and is that going forward, if the deal goes through and if these unrealistic expectations do get met, then Disney might make less stuff. That's possible. It's not kind of how it's coming off here. Let's continue, though.
From Variety, Disney CEO Bob Iger says writers and actors are not being realistic with the strikes. It's very disturbing to me. Very disturbing to me. During an appearance on CNBC's Squawk Box on Thursday morning, Disney CEO Bob Iger said the writers and actors unions going on strike in Hollywood are not being realistic with their expectations. Speaking to CNBC's David Faber from the Sun Valley Conference in Idaho, he can go to Idaho, but he can't go to Florida. In Idaho, yeah. Iger commented on the ongoing Writers Guild of America strike and imminent decision for SAG-AFTRA. It's very disturbing to me. We've talked about disruptive forces in this business and all the challenges we're facing, the recovery from COVID, which is ongoing. Things are not completely back. This is the worst time in the world to add to that disruption. This is exactly what we've been saying. Maybe we should run Disney. I should run Disney. There we go. No, this is exactly what we've been saying. We said that if you can get that money, right? But you're asking for more money when your bosses don't have the amounts of money that they had just a couple of years ago. I understand any labor organization's desire.
So here's the thing. First of all, I'm very, very surprised that Neon did not mention the COVID comment in this, because Neon and Geeky crucify Disney, Iger, and the shareholders all the time when they use COVID as an excuse for anything. Like, oh, COVID is the reason that Little Mermaid's not doing good. Oh, COVID is the reason why Disney Plus is doing bad. Oh, COVID is... And they call BS on it, and rightfully so, because COVID is very well under control at this point. We have the vaccines. They have worked. We have herd immunity. It is now endemic. And because we have now, some of us have gotten it a few times, our immune systems is built up. So COVID is not the thing it used to be. It's not crippling anything anymore. Yet Disney still uses it whenever there's a flop or a disappointment. And Neon and Geeky rightfully call Disney out, like, hey, COVID's not this thing anymore. Like, you can't use that excuse. And yet here Bob Iger is using the excuse, and Neon passes over the comments. Like, he basically says, oh, it's not COVID. Like, I guess the COVID comment isn't necessary in this case, because Neon has a separate point he wants to make. Instead, he's going like, yeah, well, the money is not there. It's not there the way it was 2 years ago. Now, he's right. They are not making the profit that they used to make 2 years ago. That being said, if the money is not there, why are all these CEOs' paychecks going up? I mean, something to consider. Like, why are the CEOs and these executives not only not getting pay cuts, but they are in fact getting pay raises? Why is that the case? That is what's a little suspicious. And here's the thing. If what Bob Iger is saying is true, and yeah, the industry's hurting right now, the last thing they want is for productions of stuff that they want to make so that they can make more money and recover. That is the last thing I want to happen. So, I mean, you strike when the iron is hot. Striking a couple of years ago when the money is flowing and everyone has the cash to go around, and basically having a shutdown Hollywood for a little while isn't going to... It's going to hurt and it's going to suck, but it's not going to be devastating. Yeah, that's not when you strike. But to strike when the industry is apparently in such a bad shape that it would be almost painfully damaging, like, fatal to do a strike at this point. Well, that's when you strike, because that's when the studios are probably going to want to listen, and they're going to want to save their jobs. So, no, this is actually the right time to strike, Neon. I'm just saying that. So let's continue.
To work on behalf of its members to get the most compensation and be compensated fairly based on the value they deliver. We managed as an industry to negotiate a very good deal with this Directors Guild that reflects the value that the directors contribute to this great business. We want to do the same thing with the writers, and we'd like to do the same thing with the actors. There's a level of expectation that they have that's just not realistic. And they're adding to the set of the challenges that this business is already facing that is, quite frankly, very disruptive. What he is saying in particular with, I believe, the writers is a lot of their demands were ridiculous. They were like, we have to have so many people in the writer's room. We have to make sure that there's a certain ethnic or diversity makeup in the writer's room. And you're not allowed to use any AI assistants at all. I think that was one of the demands, I think.
So this is where he is completely wrong about what the writers were demanding. We're going to come back to that video in a second. But let me show you in terms of what the writers were asking for. Gosh darn it. Is it freezing again? Gosh darn it. Why is it freezing? Come on, Google. I'm sorry, folks. I don't know. Chrome is giving me a headache today. But anyway, like, Neon is completely wrong about a lot of this. So here's no, I do not want to do that right now. So what do Hollywood strikers want? A look at the demands. Let's look at some of these demands. So first of all, they are looking for increased pay. That's fine. You know, the guild is seeking higher compensation for writers across the board, though there are more jobs available to WGA members than ever before because of the proliferation of streaming services. Pay for most writers is down. 10 years ago, 33% of TV writers were paid the minimum rate. Now, according to WGA, 49% are. Counting for inflation, writer pay has declined 14% in the past 5 years. The median weekly writer-producer pay is 23% over the last decade. With inflation factoring in, writers say many of their members can't even make a living wage. They are also seeking increases for their pension plan and health fund. Not unreasonable. Better residuals. For more than half a century, residuals have been a foundation for writers to make money, but streaming has upended those payouts. Writers used to be handsomely compensated anytime their work went into syndication or was sold for overseas territories. Reruns meant a big payday. Now, series and films often simply land a streaming service and stay there. Streaming services also generally don't share viewership data with filmmakers and writers, meaning that writers don't know how valuable their work has been. To replace back-end residuals, the WGA is seeking more upfront fees. Not unreasonable, in my opinion. Now, the staffing requirements. This is what he was talking about, how it's like they're requiring like 25 writers in a room and diversity. That is not what they're asking. The staffing requirements, the union wants TV shows to staff a certain number of writers for a period of time. At issue is the rising practice of mini rooms, where only a handful of writers are working on a series. Such writer rooms are often employed during development before a show is greenlit. That means writers can be working on a series that doesn't get picked up for as much of a year as they worked on it, or not as all. Now, what's the issue with that? Well, one of the issues of that is like, yes, you are getting paid, but if you are working on the show for like a year, then, and the show doesn't get picked up, then basically you don't have anything to show for your work. And of course, I don't believe you're making as much money working in these mini rooms. Continuing, the process has circumvented some of the protections WGA members have from being overworked and understaffed. The use of mini rooms accelerated during the pandemic, with writers often meeting by Zoom, a still commonplace practice. So you might notice there are no demands here about having 20 to 25 people working on a show before it's even greenlit. You will notice that there is no diversity requirements in this thing. They just want more people in the mini room so that they are not overworked and underpaid. Because keep in mind, one of the things that the guilds do is when the show is in production, there is a length of time they can work. After a certain time, they either have to rest or they have to get paid some overtime. Mini rooms circumvent a lot of these rules, and so they get a few people in there to kind of hash out the deals. And one of the reasons why they're asking for this is because if you have a more staffed room, then the show will either get greenlit faster or will be canceled faster. And as a result, if it gets greenlit faster, then everyone has stable work a lot quicker. If it gets canceled faster, the writer can move on to the next job. They can collect whatever they're getting paid for this development time, but they can move to their next job and they don't have like a year missing on their resume. That is what is going on. And I am frankly, so it is like, this is crazy how Neon is so completely wrong about this particular demand. Now, that being said, I do believe that this is probably one of the requirements that the WGA is going to, backtrack on. I believe that this is one that they will let go. I think there's a couple other issues in here that are much bigger concerns. Now, another demand they have is shorter exclusivity deals. Many of the rules around TV writing are also still based on a now increasingly outdated model. Writers might have once expected to spend almost a year working on a 22 to 25 episode season of broadcast TV. Now the average season is much shorter. Popular shows like Bridgerton might only have 8 episodes. Not only does that diminish writers' per episode pay, it can limit them from working on other programs if they're tied to longer terms of exclusivity. So less episodes, more work. The funny thing is the studios act like that they are doing writers a favor when they do this. It kind of reminds me, I was working for Uber, and they would always cut the rates, and you would have to drive longer to make the same amount of pay. But they say, hey, lower pay, longer hours, you will make more money. Not sure that's how it works. And this is probably the biggest one. Assurance on AI. Writers are also increasingly concerned that producers will use artificial intelligence to write scripts or at least fill the blanks on unfinished screenplays. The fast advancing technology has potentially widespread ramifications for Hollywood and in some cases may be a useful tool, but WJ wants protection companies to agree to safeguards around its usage. So basically, one of the things that they're concerned about is they don't want someone starting a script and then either leaving or getting fired, and then the studio taking that script and using AI to finish it. And then not only are they finishing the movie, but they are not paying the writer for that work. And in fact, they might not even give the writer credit for that work. Kevin, you're the same guy who was called a self-righteous asshat by Jeff Hicks of WCBs in 2018 when Infinity War came out. Who's WCBs and Jeff Hicks? Hey, why don't you email me a link? I'd actually be kind of curious to see what that looks like. So anyway, let's get back to the video. I'm going to pause because I've been noticing Google's been giving me problems. If it freezes for a second, just bear with me. It will be back. There we go. We are back on that. So now that we have an understanding of what they're actually asking for, and no, the writers are not asking for like 25 people in a room or diversity requirements. That probably would be unrealistic, but they're not asking for that. And it's amazing that such a basic thing has been lost on Neon. Let's continue.
Don't quote me on that, but
yeah, don't quote him on that. I mean, here's the thing. I'm going to actually say, like, look, I say that too. We all say that, but I think if you're going to say the writers are being unrealistic because they're asking for this, this, and this, but don't quote me on that. It's like, no, like you figure out what exactly it is they're asking for, because that's a serious accusation. And if it's not true, you should not be saying that they are unrealistic. In fact, knowing what the writer's asking for now, I wonder if Neon still thinks what the writers are saying is unrealistic.
Iger's like, yeah, that's not realistic because maybe we can produce a show with like a skeleton crew of writers and, whatever. But if you're saying we have to have 20, then that just adds to the cost of the show, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And let's be honest, a lot of writers now are not good. They're not good. And they're not as poor as they were trying to make it out to be either. If you look into the
Okay, look, before we get into what the writers are paid, I don't think this is a stupid argument like, oh, well, the writers are not good, therefore they shouldn't get a pay raise. They shouldn't get paid a living rate. Come on. Seriously. And by the way, one of the reasons that the writing isn't good is because they don't have the staff writers that they should be when they're developing a show and things like that. So no, everyone deserves to get paid a living wage. And if the writers had more writers in the mini rooms rather than just a couple, maybe the shows would be better. Who knows?
The compensation, and people have done spreadsheets on the compensation for unionized writers in Hollywood, for WGA writers. They're probably making more money than you or I are making, or at least, yeah. I mean, it's they're not broke.
Well, that depends, because here's the thing. Let's say a writer is making $100,000 living in LA. Someone from Ohio or Nashville, Tennessee, or Orlando, Florida might go like, oh my gosh, they're living in a mansion or something. Like, who are they? What are they complaining about? But here's the issue. You're living in Los Angeles, one of the most expensive places in the world. And you have to keep in mind that sometimes if you get like a check for a show and you finish that show, it could be a year or two before you get another show. And you have to like wait tables or serve coffee while you're looking for that next job. And this is also why the residuals were so important, because if it was a hit show on network TV, you would be getting residual checks. So that buffers the blow for waiting it out. Like the way it could be pointed out is, let's say someone gives you a $50,000 payday, one paycheck, $50,000. Now, obviously taxes are coming out. So let's say it's $45,000. Well, that's pretty good. Most people I say, you did that for a few months work? Wow, you're rich. You just keep doing that. Well, what if it takes you 8 months to get the next $50,000 check? Well, you're basically making minimum wage at that point. And not every writer is Aaron Sorkin or Ryan Murphy. They're just not. So, I mean, and the thing is, even though Neon says that they've made spreadsheets and stuff, I'm noticing that he's not actually using any of these examples. He's not showing the spreadsheets. He's not doing any of that. So this is basically a take my word for it. They're not as poor as you and me. In fact, dare I say it, Neon, you're probably making more money than some of these writers, especially considering the time and what they have to do before they even get paid, where you're getting paid daily, you're getting residuals from all your videos and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I haven't actually crunched the numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if Clownfish TV made a pretty good penny compared to what the writers do. Anyway.
And I understand if you're working on a show that's making a ton of money that you want your cut. I completely get that. But if you're a grunt writer and not a showrunner, you don't have the bargaining power. So they're going to make sure that the directors get theirs first, because a lot of these directors.
And that's one of the reasons why the WGA is striking, because the WGA is the bargaining power. And that's what the strike is primarily for, the grunt workers who don't have that bargaining power. When you don't have the bargaining power, you're taking what they're giving you, and the WGA is trying to raise the bare minimum. That's the whole point of this.
Those are also showrunners. They're also writers themselves. And then they're going to kind of work their way down. I think writers are going to get the short end of the deal in all this.
If you acknowledge that writers are getting the short end of the deal on this, why on earth are you siding with Bob Iger of all people? Seriously.
It's expected that SAG-AFTRA, the actors union, will go on strike Thursday morning after contract talks concluded Wednesday night without a resolution. This will effectively halt all scripted film and TV production, much of which had already been delayed due to the ongoing writer's strike, which is in its third month. Actually, I think the studios are kind of glad, because they're using this opportunity to cancel a lot of shows that were not bringing any value.
This is not true. Here's the thing. If the shows, here's one of the theories about Clownfish TV. I call it a conspiracy theory on their part, because this just really is not how the industry works. They kind of make it sound like Hollywood is strong-armed into making certain types of shows that don't make money, that are there to fill a diversity quota, and that basically they need to look for an excuse to cancel a show if it's not making money. That is not how this works. If a show is not pulling its weight, they will cancel the show. Why do you think there are so many activist groups like, oh, how could HBO cancel this show with this LGBT representation? It's one of the few shows, because it wasn't making money. Why did ABC cancel this comedy show about African-American teachers? We don't see that very often, and there's less representation. Well, they canceled it because it's not making money. Studios do not need a strike as an excuse to cancel anything. And here's the thing. Even if they did want an excuse to cancel things, they also don't want a strike that's going to shut down things that they want to make. Because, yeah, this might give them the excuse, if you will, to cancel a show or two or a movie here and there that maybe they didn't want to make, or it's not in the budget. But they would have canceled those long before a strike happened anyway. Disney doesn't want Deadpool shut down. You think they like having to completely restructure the MCU? And keep in mind, I think they were going to start backing down on the Star Wars shows and the Marvel shows even before the strike happened. This strike is not an excuse to cancel anything. This strike will hurt the studios. It absolutely will. So let's continue.
SAG-AFTRA has not gone on strike in over 4 decades, and the last time both unions were striking concurrently was in 1960. Iger said that while he respects the right of the unions to get as much as they possibly can in compensation for their people, I do agree with that. I think if you can make that money, get it.
I'm glad we agree on that, at least.
But you also have to realize that there are limits, and you have to realize your employer's side of it too, which is we only have so much money, right?
Well, that's also one of the reasons why the Producers Guild just screwed this up. I mean, look, there's always a negotiation. Before a strike happens, people come forward and they say, this is what we want. And then the studios say, or the producers say, this is what we can give. And they work it out and they hash it out. Apparently, the producers are not even talking to the writers or the actors. Now, that's because apparently there are rumors that they're trying to break the WGA. They want to break the union. And they want to just hold out until the writers' houses start getting lost and they start having to not pay their rent. They're hoping that by weakening the writers' pockets that they could break the union. Now that SAG is also striking and they can't fall back on any of their stuff. Like I said, Deadpool 3, I'm sure Disney wanted that to be out in theaters next year. Ain't going to happen. Beyond the Spider-Verse, that's not going to happen next year. Once you start hurting their bottom line, though, that's when they have the bargaining power too. So
they must be realistic about the business environment and what this business can deliver. Yeah, Disney just had a bunch of box office failures. They just wrote off Willow and some other Disney Plus shows because they failed so badly. It was worth more to them to just take them off the platform completely. And you want more.
And again, Disney does not get to dictate whether this strike ends or not. This is a completely different union that Disney is a part of that bargains. And so whether or not Disney likes it or not, that union's the union that is going to negotiate the terms.
More money. You never ask your boss for a raise when they're contemplating layoffs. You know, like you're not going to get more money if they're having to lay off people.
But that being said, if they strike long enough and the bosses start losing money and they can save money by giving you a raise, then yes, play that chip, play that card, if you will.
Just it doesn't happen. Iger continued. It will have a very, very damaging effect on the whole business. And unfortunately, there's huge collateral damage in the industry to people who are supportive services. And I could go on and on. It will affect people. It will affect the economy of different regions, even because of the sheer size of the business. It's a shame. It really is a shame.
Now, this is another thing that CEOs will do when they are going to lose some money themselves. One of the things I say is like, well, look, this everyday worker, they're going to be affected by it. This everyday worker, they're going to be affected by it. You know, it kind of reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of the CEO of Budweiser, because Bud Light, I don't want to get into too much. I'm sure you all heard of the Dylan Mulvaney controversy. I'm not going to get into it here, but basically Bud Light hired Dylan Mulvaney for like a couple of promo videos and sent like a customized Bud Light can with her face on it. And the promotion was a failure. It was an absolute failure. And Bud Light has lost $18 billion in valuation because people were not happy with the promotion. Now then, I'm not here to tell you whether or not people were right or wrong to boycott the product. I believe you can do whatever you want with your money. But one of the things that the CEO started saying was, well, think of the hardworking people who make the beer. Think of the hardworking people who sell our beer. They're being hurt by this too. And it's like, you know, that is such a manipulative straw man argument because yes, they are being affected by this, but who greenlit the promotion? Who did this? Who did that? Guess what? It's the CEO. The CEO and the marketing executives who decide to go with that promotion, they are what caused the drop in demand for the beer. People do not need to buy that beer just so that everyday people don't suffer. And the writers and the actors, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're sorry that some of the caterers and stuff are going to be losing some money. But at the end of the day, they're still not being paid fairly, and they need to. And that's why they're going to strike. And they have to think about themselves just as much as they think about everyone else. And here's the thing. If they make more money, then they have more money to spend. Therefore, trickle-down economics is not a 100% myth. It is a reality in some circumstances. So it is in everyone's best interest, including the CEOs, to pay their writers and actors fairly, especially since this strike could last months and they could lose millions of dollars in the meantime, where they could have just come to the agreement early on. And guess what? Everyone would have been fine.
Iger's comments come the day after it was announced that he will remain the CEO of Walt Disney through 2026. In a shocking move, Iger returned as Disney CEO in November 2020 and objective about the future of those businesses. So we're talking Disney Channel and FX and some of their other and ABC. So they might sell ABC. They might sell Fox or FX. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if that has to do with the argument, but I do. One thing that's interesting is Disney might be doing that in preparation. See, here's one of the things that Disney might be thinking about. They're really hoping that residuals for streaming does not end up becoming a thing. And so they might be thinking like, well, maybe we can sell our linear broadcasting and then there'd be less royalties to actors and writers. And this is pretty much what the writers and actors are trying to avoid. One of the things anyway, they see that that the CEOs and stuff are moving the content to streaming. They're not getting residuals on streaming content. And so they're like, no, we need that content. We need that. We need those residuals. So you can only see Bob Iger almost preparing for like a future and where residual checks are few and fewer, unless the WGA and SAG-AFTRA get better contracts so they can get residuals for streaming. Then you probably won't see Disney sell these linear networks.
There clearly is content that they create that is core to Disney, but the distribution model, the business model that forms the underpinning of that business and that is delivering great profits over the years is definitely broken. We have to call it like it is. When I came back, one of the things I discovered was that the disruptive forces that had been preying on that business for a while are greater than I thought. It's eye-opening. It's eye-opening.
Yeah. Well, Iger, you're the one who pushed into streaming. All the executives are the ones who decided to break the model, to change the paradigm shift. And when people came and said, hey, the model has changed, the paradigm has shifted, where's our money? And it's like, oh, well, it's different. And so we can't do this. Like, well, who did this in the first place? The CEOs and executives, and they didn't get a pay cut, but everyone else did.
Iger addressed presidential hopeful and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' attacks on Disney.
We're not getting it. We are not getting into that. I'm sorry.
Not covering that one. So,
yeah,
look, again, this goes back to a lot of what we're saying, where you don't ask your boss for a raise when times are tough, and these writers don't understand the reality of the situation they're in. And I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to make sure that they get theirs, in before lock, right? But look what happened with Vice. Those writers at Vice were union, and they still got shit canned, a lot of them, and a lot of them are still fighting for their compensation. So it doesn't really guarantee you anything.
It doesn't, but there's a big difference between Vice and Business Insider compared to like Paramount, Warner Brothers Discovery, and Disney. I think they have much deeper pockets. They will have a much better chance of getting those things. So many things wrong with that video. I almost wonder, and again, no disrespect to Clownfish TV. I do like the channel. I'm a subscriber. And I do like a lot of their opinions. I really wonder if they understand the situation, because watching that video alone, I would think that maybe they didn't understand. But here's another thing. We're not going to do the whole other video thing. Let me switch it and see if this works. But this video came up and they don't really show any more understanding of this.
Now it is a little bit different with writers and yada yada. I get that, but
so they're talking about this thing where it's like, here's the real Brandy from our favorite show, P-Valley, showing us the residuals. This is the reality of life working actors. What is $3.99 and what is 1 penny? So they're showing low residuals, and Geeky makes this comment that I think is really not relevant.
Again, I think that this is proportionate with the number of people that are watching the show. Now, P-Valley might be the most popular show on TV. I don't know. I don't watch P-Valley. It doesn't look like a show for me. It looks like
Mary Sue loves it. Shocker.
The Mary Sue loves it, so that probably means I'm going to hate it.
I've not seen this show, for the record.
But I think you need to make your own deals. This is one of the reasons that I am kind of like against unions in some ways.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
This person is in this. Look at that couch. Look at that view behind.
That's
her.
Brandy. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at all the beautiful stuff that's sitting there. I am mad because I only got $3.99 for my residual.
So this is Brandy.
Feel
right?
for me.
So this is what always got me about this. When you have these news outlets going to bat for these studios or going to bat for people, whatever, is they've spent all this time like standing for these companies. Now these companies are showing you their true colors, that they're just corporations, right? But you're also standing for individuals that have more money than you will ever have.
So the point about this Brandy clip, I will admit that her standing in that super nice penthouse, it looks like, saying that she got like a $3.99 residual check, that's a weird look. But you also have to keep in mind, like, this is Brandy we're talking about. It kind of reminds me of when Barry Manilow showed a residual check for Spotify, and it was like $5.24 or something like that. And it's like, it's Barry Manilow. He should be making more money than that. And if he's making only like money that won't even buy you McDonald's, then what are the lower people making? You know, and that's a question worth asking.
And you're not gonna siphon any of their success off into your own pockets by sucking P-Valley. I mean, it's just kind of weird that you've got these writers that are getting paid like $3 to $10 an article, being like, you know, yes, you go out and get your millions of dollars.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're not gonna see any of that.
I mean, I don't disagree that the residuals and AI is an issue, and I do think that $3.99 is you know, and we don't know the contracts. I want to put that out there too. We don't know their contracts. Their contracts might be that they get a huge amount of residuals and they're not getting it. And I know for a fact that we've talked about other Marvel shows before. People could write a whole story from a comic and they get like what, $5,000 if it gets used. And then these actors are complaining because I only got like $500 residual, but the person who literally wrote the fucking story that they based on got $5,000 or whatever.
Well, see, this is one of the situations where
anyway, the video is called Hollywood is Closed, and at one point, Geeky says like, "Oh, Lilo's barking." I might have to wrap this up soon. So, she says like, "Why don't you show us what you got paid up front for the work? Don't show us your residual checks. You know, show us what you got paid up front." And I'm thinking, this is not an argument because they're striking about the residuals. They're also striking about upfront fees and everything. But yeah, they could show you upfront fees, but I mean, it's like that's not what they're striking about per se. Their big concern is the AI and the residuals. And so that's why they're showing the residual checks, because they're showing that it's not sustainable. They show what they're paid up front. It looks a lot better, but then you have to point out that, yeah, that has to last a little while. So, you know, anyway, again, I know this is like, it's not like I'm trying to kiss butt when I say like, I do like Clownfish TV. I do, but I just don't know if they're understanding the situation. I think that they're just, Neon particularly just sounds like he doesn't understand what this strike is about. I would, if I were them, probably do some debates or something with people, read up a little bit more, like really get your facts straight before you start talking about these things. Because no, they're not asking for 25 people in a room. They're not asking for diversity. They're asking for really basic, simple stuff. And I think they have every right to. So anyway, folks, the puppy is barking, so I need to go check what's going on. We're pretty much done anyway. But thank you for joining us live. I would like to know, what do all of you think about this? You know, we'd love to know. Comment below, like, share, subscribe. You can find us on all the major audio apps, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, things like that. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.